Call to order. The Oradell Public School Board of Ed meeting on July 14th, 2021. Sunshine Law Statement, or actually, Mr. Marmara, would you like to lead us in a flag salute? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Sunshine Law Statement. All requirements of the Open Publics Meeting Act has been met for this meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Oradell. Notice of this meeting was filed with the Town Record and Town News, and all persons requesting such notice. Mission statement. Mrs. Norian, would you like to read that?
I'll be glad to. The Oradell Public School District is dedicated to the ongoing pursuit of educational excellence through comprehensive, innovative curriculum and instruction. The district is committed to providing opportunities for social, emotional, and academic discovery to foster curiosity, courage, and character. Our goal is to prepare our students to become lifelong learners who are self-directed, resilient, productive, responsible citizens.
Thank you. Roll call. Mr. Marmar.
Mrs. Negum,
Here.
Mr. Griffin,
Here.
Mrs. Levy,
Here.
Mrs. Norian,
Here.
Mrs. Shapiro,
Here.
Mrs. Walker,
Here.
Mr. Walsh,
Here.
Mr. Darian,
Here.
Mrs. Nichols. Okay.
Open to the public for agenda items only. If you are attending via Zoom, just raise your hand and I will enter you into the meeting. Otherwise, having seen none, I'd like to move on to Board President's remarks. Actually, earlier in the evening during our Personnel Committee, we've discussed a couple of things I'd like to bring up. One is the board retreat. I want to remind everyone it's September 28th.
September.
September?
Oh, I'm sorry,
July.
is that wrong?
Yeah,
July,
July
I
28th.
put down 9, sorry. July 28th, so mark your calendars. Also, we have a request to change the board meeting in September. Initially, we have it on the 8th, and because 8th is a holiday, we're looking to move it to the 1st. Is that going to be a problem?
The retreat on the 28th, is that going to be here, or is that?
Yeah, generally, I think we have it.
That's usually at the Riverdale Middle School.
Yeah,
It's going to be there, then?
yeah. So in terms of September's regular scheduled board meeting, moving it from the 8th to the 1st, is that going to be a problem with anyone? I probably will not be able to attend. My daughter's starting college. But if that seems to be okay with everyone, we'll mark it as tentatively for the 1st. If that's a problem, just let us know, and we can always make an adjustment. Also, we've been requested by the OEA to move back to school night this year from September 23rd to September 9th, which will be this second week after we were open. And that's just an FYI, unless anyone has any problems with it.
The 23rd, is it?
The 23rd is moving to the 9th.
Now, as far as that, do we have to put that in the form of a resolution to change the calendar?
Yeah,
A
I'll
date
probably
like that, so we'll,
add that to administrative items.
okay.
Okay. And that's all I have. I wasn't really prepared tonight to be board president, but, so, okay. With that, Superintendent's report?
So before I begin the update about the district goals report, one additional update is that in November, I presented our HIB self-assessment score. That score of a 71 was then sent to the New Jersey Department of Education. We received word last month that our score has been accepted by the state, and it has been now posted on the front page of the Oradell Public School website, along with that presentation that was done in November that explains the score, and an additional PowerPoint that explains how the state calculates those scores. So now to the big part of my report today, an update about our district goals. So at our last board meeting, I shared very briefly that we had met our Link It goal, but I was asked to provide some additional information just to give us the background to bring into the board retreat on the 28th. So you'll remember that District Goal 1 originally had to do with our progress on the New Jersey State Learning Assessment. However, we smartly set an alternate goal in case the NJSLA was not administered this year. And that goal was to show a 10 percentage point increase on the language arts portion of Link It in grades 3 through 6, and a 25% percentage point increase on mathematics. Our second goal had to do with the increase of integration of technology into the teaching and learning process. And our third goal had to do with our continued work on social emotional learning, with continuing to document support systems for all members of our community. So District Goal 1, before I get into the nitty-gritty of the data, I always think it's helpful to review Link It. Some of you have been with us when we first began Link It many, many moons ago, and some of you are more new. So to understand Link It, you need to understand why it was first created. It was created to be a predictability software. It wanted to help districts understand which students would pass high-stakes testing and which students needed additional support to pass high-stakes testing. Since then, it's really grown to be more of a formative data platform. It really tells us where our students' strengths are and where they need to continue to grow. Many districts actually are using Link It without even using the Navigator Report. The Navigator Report, this test we give 3 times a year, was what their calling card in the beginning, but they've grown in so many other ways. The important piece to note about the Navigator Report is it underpredicts. So I know sometimes we look at the data and we look at the meeting and exceeding number and we say, wait a minute, how can only 58% of our population be meeting or exceeding the standards, in this case, in language arts in 2018-19? So we really need to push ourselves to look past that number. That number they come about that number by looking at the performance of students who have scored the same number of achievement on a test and how they did on Link It 2 years ago. The number next to it, the weighted average, also takes into account how a student actually did on a whole slew of standardized tests. We know that sometimes a student doesn't do great on one specific test. So what Link It's trying to do is to put as many different variables together to give us an accurate measure. I can tell you from experience at OPS, our C Navigator report, which we usually give in June, often has some not great results. Because if you're in 6th grade and it's June and you've already taken the NJSLA and your teacher's telling you you need to take one more assessment, you don't necessarily give it your all. So what we have found that this weighted average score, which shows a predictability in 2018-19 of 78%, gets us a little closer to our actual predictability ranking. Actually, in 2018 and 19, we had 86% of our population. So if we had believed Link It that year, we would have been really disappointed in our scores. And in 2018-19, we actually had our highest performance on the NJSLA in many, many years. So whenever you see that meeting and exceeding, I always want you to remember that. Link It's going to lose customers if they overpredict. If they tell you people are going to do well and then they don't, but if they underpredict and then students do better, well, everyone's just happy. So when we look at our Link It, I thought it would be helpful not just to look at this year, but also to put it in perspective, not even just by looking at last year, because last year we had that March to June period that was inconsistent at times. So I also put in our 2018-19 score reports, which help us to see what our growth was like in a full year of learning, where we actually did incredibly well in our NJSLA score. So what you'll see here is that in our growth, we did meet exactly our 10 percentage point growth goal. We increased the students showing high growth. And that's what Link It does also. It shows you which students are showing typical growth, the growth we would expect them to make, which students are showing exceeding levels of growth, and which students are struggling in their growth percentages. Also really exciting, I thought, was where we came in versus where we where we finished. So in 2018-19, we started with 58 percentage point score for the whole school, and this year 56, but we ended at the exact same spot this year, showing higher levels of growth, even though we had less periods of instruction. And I really credit our administrative team for putting together an academic schedule that really said, what is it we need to get done if we have less time? And making sure that that happened. We spent a lot of time in September talking about the priority standards at every grade level. What is the most important topics and content to cover this year? I've also included that same data showing the meeting and exceeding and also the weighted average. As I said, I try to always look here. And you're going to see that we had a decrease of students in partially meeting. We had no students in not meeting. And what's really exciting is we're always talking about how are we meeting the needs of our highest ability learners? Are we over-focusing on struggling learners at the expense of making sure all learners are growing? And if you look at this number, saying that 58 students were exceeding in 2018-19 and 87 are exceeding the standards now, I think that's a real credit to the fact that we're using Linkit and we're using data and we're making sure that we're hitting the needs of all learners. So when we switch to mathematics, I always theorize when I'm looking at data and try to put the story together. And I think that our Linkit reading growth, well, let's think about it. We had students who didn't have 8 million other activities. Guess what they had more time for? Reading. I actually think that COVID had a positive impact on our reading. Linkit does not assess writing. And I think that in September, that's an area we'll have to focus on. But my instinct right now is we had students who were reading a lot more, and that may be demonstrated or reflected in that Linkit growth. So what about math? If you missed a big chunk of the end of last year and then you had less time this year, how did that impact? And what's really quite amazing is that we met our 25% percentage point growth. We actually had a 29 percentage point growth. I think the 25, we probably could have been a little more rigorous in our goal setting. And our growth patterns are almost exactly the same as they were in 2018-19. And again, part of that has to do with the fact that when we were cutting minutes, we said we can't cut math time. If we had 65 minutes of math prior, we still had to find a way to put a schedule together that had 65 minutes of math instruction. And then we can look at that data also with the weighted average. And our weighted average, in 2018-19, we actually had 74% of our population pass, showing meeting or exceeding on the NJSLA. So this is still a little bit low. But again, if I'm theorizing, the reason we do better in language arts is we actually have pretty strong writers as students. So that difference in what Linkit is showing versus what we actually performed on the NJSLA is very likely because our writing scores brought us up even higher. So in mathematics, my belief is that it's a much better predictor of the actual score. And the other piece that I do think it's important, especially when you're talking about mathematics, you're not going to show a big difference in assessing a reader 4 weeks later. Readers don't make, in first grade, readers make tremendous strides in 4 weeks. But in third, fourth, fifth, and sixth grade, 4 weeks doesn't result in huge growth. But 4 weeks of math actually is a factor, and we did give Linkit 4 weeks earlier this year. We wanted to make sure we had that data back to make some decisions about summer programming. So as I said before, while Linkit began as a predictability software platform, it's really grown to being a warehouse for data. It's where we keep our student reading levels. If I was principal and a parent called to make an appointment to see me, the first thing I would do is pull up their student's Linkit profile. It would show me every reading level since kindergarten, their writing scores, and their Linkit. It helps me get to know a student. It also, in September, will help all of our teachers get to know their new students. Because every teacher will have access to a report like this. And this is a student class school report. So if we look at F. Carney, who is in Lincoln, allows me to anonymize all the data. It's actually great for teaching and teaching teachers or parents how to read data. So this one's standard over here, which has to do with dividing unit fractions by whole numbers and vice versa. Well, when I look at that, F. Carney is struggling in that area, okay? They're scoring 33%. But you know what? The whole class as a whole is scoring 71%. What that tells me as a teacher is I don't need to spend 2 days working on that skill. I need to give F. Carney more help working on that skill. And that's how we teach smarter in our classrooms, and we make sure that we're using our data to inform instruction, because if 77% if the class doesn't need that skill right now, let's not waste our time with the entire class on it. Let's use small group instruction to the students who do need that skill set. Our teachers are also given at the beginning of the year what's called a fingertip profile, which comes with our Linkit service. It gives them a one-sheet look at every student in their class and how they are performing and their skills, their strengths, their areas to grow. Our second goal had to do with increasing technology integration with purpose. And I always say with purpose, because using technology for the sake of technology does nothing. It's bells and whistles with no real heart. So sometimes when we talk about technology, we only look at it as what are students doing. But this year we really wanted to look at what are our teachers doing that improve the learning process. So yes, we did increase our use of Google Classroom to students and families in grades K through 2. I learned in October that last year when we gave all our students emails in grades 3 through 6, some of our neighboring districts hadn't done that. And they were behind the 8 ball a little bit on it. We're still now talking about next year, how will that look? What grades will get emails? Will third grade get emails, or do they not need it at this point? We also really started to make our students actively engaged with Google Classroom, not just as a place to hold the lessons, but a place to interact with your teacher. And I've seen our teachers do amazing work with giving students feedback in writing, because they can instantaneously give feedback. We're in a classroom, in a writing conference, you have to wait for your teacher to get to you. We also purchased a new program. It is called Dreambox, and we're currently using it in K1 with thoughts of moving it up the grades to replace IXL. It does the same thing IXL does, but in a slightly more engaging manner, and it teaches better than IXL, where IXL kind of assesses and says, okay, you didn't do it again, where Dreambox actually has some parts to it that will actually help the student and teach the student to get better at that specific skill. And I will tell you, when we launched it in first grade, the first graders came in the next day and were like, can we have more? My mom said that was homework. It was great, because it feels like a game. We also launched the use of Formative as an assessment tool in the upper grades. And what Formative does is it allows you to take a PDF and show your entire class that PDF. And then they're filling out the answers instantaneously, and you as a teacher can see every single student filling it out, so you right away know who needs help. And our teachers have really, it's like anything else at first, it feels a little scary and it feels new, and you get 3 teachers who really take to it, and then they came to a faculty meeting and showed how it was helping them, and all of a sudden we start to see it spread a little bit more. And again, the improved usage of Zoom. The breakout room was something we felt wasn't being used well last year, and if you want engagement, if you want students to talk to each other, well, you can't have 20 kids and one teacher on a Zoom. You need to find ways for them to engage in smaller groups. And we continue to work on using Linkit, because as I said, it's something that has so much data, and you just have to find the ways to make it work for you and for your classroom. And our third goal had to do with social and emotional learning. We know that last year we took on the goal of implementing Open Circle in grades K through 5, and also providing all other staff members background in that program so they would use the same language. So this year we said, okay, let's move past just that one time of the day. How do we make sure all members of our community have support? So Mrs. Mason launched a Bitmoji Classroom that has some really great interactive features on it. It's how she shared her monthly programs with students, and below you'll see some of her monthly programs that she did. One of the things that I found really interesting is our students do better when they have to give others compliments than when they had to give themselves compliments. That's still something that's really uncomfortable for them. So when we had to do turkeygrams, we had 258 students submit small Flipgrid videos about thanking someone, because our turkeygrams are about showing thanks and giving thanks in November, thanking a classmate for helping them, thanking a teacher. When it came to the gifts we're giving and what gift did you have, well, we started to decline a little bit. Mrs. Mason picks these themes based on what she's seeing in the school. So if she's working with a lunch bunch and she's noticing students are having problems with accepting mistakes, that will sometimes become the next monthly theme. Like, how do you embrace mistakes? How do you understand that it's not just you experiencing a mistake? Everyone goes through that sometimes. She continues to maintain the counselor blog, and we spent some time this year really talking about how do you translate Open Circle to a COVID world. The program is based on sitting next to each other in a circle. Well, we couldn't sit next to each other in a circle in our classrooms anymore. So in our primary grades, it was very easy. They just did it outside during recess. But how do you take that and take those lessons and make it work in the world that we were in? And we also felt it was really important to focus on our staff. So Mrs. Hawley began launching Mindful Mondays for staff. And it's a way to help staff to develop some contemplative practices that we also hope that they'll bring back to their classroom as well. As we move forward, we are continuing to work on identifying an SEL program, and I anticipate you will hear more at the board retreat about a social emotional benchmarking tool that we're looking at called Panorama. I'm not typically a huge proponent of putting scores on social emotional learning, but as I looked at Panorama, I realized that it would help us name some of the skills we need, like grit, like resiliency. And it has some ways that we can then share that language with our parent population as well. So does the board have any questions, or do you want to hold them off all to the retreat? Mr. Walsh.
Can you tell me how many of the 169 students were invited back in the summer for language arts? And how many of the 192 students were asked back for
Okay.
summer school, or whatever they're calling it?
The only students that we
In math.
Right. The only students that we invited back were partially meeting. We're not inviting students who are in the approaching section. So that number goes down. Any student that was in partially meeting in language arts and also was below the level in reading was invited back. That was 22 students for the June program, and I don't have the exact data for the July program.
You're saying approaching?
Partially. You had to be in partially meeting, because our data shows that some of those students in approaching are actually passing NJSLA, and they might have been in approaching, but they were meeting. They were reading on the grade level that we expect them to be reading at.
Can you explain the approaching and the bubble part?
Sure.
They're not, to me, if I look at this, they're not meeting, they're not passing.
Okay, so let's look at the slide
They're
that I
not
just.
exceeding.
Okay, so let's look at this slide right here that I just put up, okay? So this, we have 420, I'm going to go to Form C. I'm going to go up here to 2018-19 Form C.
No, those kids are,
Yeah, I'm just going to, I could do the same thing with down here if you'd like.
Okay.
So we had 399 students, okay, that took the Form C Navigator. Now, you're seeing that only 230 are meeting or exceeding. That does not include the bubble, the approaching, or the partial, okay? But look at that thing right next to it. 100 of those students would have passed the NJSLA.
I'm looking at not meeting,
Right.
partially meeting,
approaching in bubble.
Approaching.
130, 169 students,
Yes.
right.
In-
But
in
look at the.
language arts.
Yes, so look at the column next to it that says weighted and achieving. So if you look up here, let's see if we get it, Mike.
No, isn't it the same thing I'm looking at here?
Yes, but I want you to look at this column instead. Because this is actually what Linkit believes will pass. This 334. This number here is just a really bad number because this number doesn't take into account that the student didn't do a great job. It doesn't take into account the pieces that this takes into account. How has the student done on past tests? Was this just one bad test? So Linkit actually thinks 334 students will have passed the NJSLA in language arts. Now, of those 334, so that brings us 65 students, I'm going to guess that half of them have been invited this summer. Now, I cannot tell you they are all attending our programs.
So you're saying the weighted.
Yes.
334.
Yep. Because, as I said in the beginning, let's see, this one. So this is 2018-19, the last year we gave the NJSLA.
Okay.
Okay, so we had 424 students. If you just looked over here, you would have thought that almost 200 of them weren't going to pass. But guess what? Linkit actually said it was this number, and it was even higher than that. They're under-predicting. They're saying students sometimes are in approaching that really our data is showing they're passing. And the bubble category, there is no such thing on bubble as NJSLA. They're adding this in kind of as a safety net, so they're not telling us these students are going to absolutely pass, but guess what? They're passing.
So all the bubble, you're saying are passing.
Yeah. I'm not going to say
So
all,
why are we-
98% of them.
Why are we using Linkit
We're using Linkit for,
if they have categories that don't exist or are labeled wrong?
we're using Linkit for the partially meeting because we know that these students are students we need to have on our radar, and it gives us a way to show their growth, but we're really using Linkit to go back to the other piece of why Linkit is good for this. Because when we give that test, Linkit is saying to us, this is not just how a student did, this is how a class did, and this is how a school did. So we know what we need to be better at teaching. So where Linkit was at first about just those overall passing numbers, it's really more about now having data that tells us and where's the hole that we have to fill. You've spoken about that a lot at board meetings. Let's figure out where the holes are and what do we have to fill. Linkit helps us to identify those holes. So when we had an intervention program in the winter, we worked specifically with students who struggled in January Linkit on fractions. Those were the only kids we pulled together because we
And-
were going to fill the fraction hole.
And using Linkit, we can tell which teachers
Yes.
are not teaching a specific thing in English, in math, and in language arts, right?
And we can even go the positive way and say, we can also see which teachers are teaching something so well that we want them to teach everyone else
Okay,
how they're doing it.
that's good.
Yeah. But Linkit does give us all of that data. And they've actually, one of the pieces where they've grown is they've given us ways to share that data with students and teachers. So a teacher can now have a report to see how they're doing compared to their grade level. And we can meet as a grade level team and say, wait a minute, you three seem to do really great at adding fractions. Did you do something differently? I mean, it could be just the cohort of students in the class, but you don't know that until you begin to have those conversations.
Okay.
What groups of students in these grades did not take it? Were there any, like, if they were remote only or any other, like, subset?
No, we actually, what we do if you are in a remote setting, and we started this last year, and I actually was so proud of our community for this. We actually had students in a Zoom at the same time as they took Linkit, so that, A, we could try to monitor that there was no external help at home. It is something that we're still a little concerned about, and we'll see in the fall. Not only will we give Linkit in the fall, and it's important to remember in the fall, for your current third grader, it will be the fourth grade standards that they're assessed on in the fall, because we need that benchmark level. But the state is mandating that we give an assessment in the fall. It's called the Start Strong Assessment. So that will assess the year before. And they have promised us that it will be very short and not painful, so we are not spending our entire fall assessing students.
That's, pardon me, that's new this year?
Yes, it was part of the waiver to not give the assessments in the spring. The state said, but we will give this Start Strong assessment in the fall instead.
Everybody? Or
Yes, all students.
Like grades 4 through 6 or?
4 through 6, it's actually,
Oh, upper grades.
I have to check on third. I think for some reason it may actually include
Not
third as well.
kindergarten or
Third
first
through
grade.
6, no,
Okay.
no.
Robin?
I have a question about Dreambox, just I didn't catch. Does it go all the way up to the upper grades?
Yes, it is only math, though. It is not a language arts platform where IXL does both.
Oh, so like cost effective wise, it might be better to do, I'm just saying, as a parent, I'll put on the parent hat, IXL in math has caused me to scream, so I can.
Yeah, we actually are looking at using some of our federal ESSER funds to purchase Dreambox. We're in negotiations with them on a quote right now. In terms of language arts, one of our goals moving forward will be to audit all of our programming, because we have Raz Kids in some grades, we have Newsella in some grades. Do we need all of these platforms, or is there one that is best? IXL Language Arts made sense because we bundled it together, right?
Yeah.
But if we're not going to use it for math, it might not be the best platform anymore.
And I will also say the formative, witnessing it is really amazing that teachers can see just as what they're putting in and stuff like that. It is really, I almost wonder, and not to put anything more, I wonder if other board members who haven't seen that or whatever, if they were interested. It is a pretty cool feature that they were using, so kudos on that.
Any other questions? I have one. You mentioned it in the second goal at the very last end. Continue working with teachers on using Linkit to assess student learning. So, I remember back in the day when they didn't even have the, and I wrote it down. I can't find it here. Hold on one second. The Navigator Report. And when they first came out with the Navigator Report, I thought it was great, but it was very difficult to read. And I thought, I think a couple of years ago, I asked you if it's gotten any better, and you said it did. I just want a status update as to where we are, and if you can also expand what we do for new teachers and how we get them up to speed with Linkit.
Okay, so Linkit is part of our new teacher orientation program, because it is a pretty important program that teachers know how to access information to. And as I said, every teacher in grades 1 and up will get the fingertip profile. Now that actually comes in hard copy as well, so it takes it out of the system. But it's not the Navigator Report for teachers. The Navigator Report is for us. As soon as a student finishes taking Linkit, the teacher can see the results, which wasn't the case back then.
Yeah.
We had to wait for the Navigator Report, and we were frustrated because you couldn't get a Navigator Report until the entire school finished assessing, where now it is not uncommon to have a teacher call and say, so-and-so didn't do well, can I make them take it again? Because they instantaneously get that. What teachers are learning is reports like this one up on the screen right now are so useful that it's making Linkit it's making staff more intrinsically motivated to use it, and we are using it more. So when you use something more, guess what? Your teachers are going to use it more. Formative is a perfect example. We paid for Formative, and it is not the cheapest of one of our platforms. And in September and October, we were like, okay, we got a couple people using it. And as soon as we did that, we have key people in the building who are now our Linkit experts, and they will work with any staff member.
Okay.
Mr. Darian, I'll also say, again, not to only give the parent view, but I also noticed that when you're meeting with teachers, a lot of the teachers are actually showing the parents, like, okay, if you as a parent
Right.
came and asked the teacher, like, what can I work on with my student?
Right.
I've been shown a Linkit report saying, well, this is where they struggled, why don't, this is what you can do. And we, as parents who don't know, like, it was very easy to navigate and to read it.
And I think what Lincoln's done better is they've taken it, I happen to show the report that shows the standards. Standard isn't parent speak, right?
No.
But they now have done it with skills. So instead of reading the standard, it says adding fractions. And that has made it much better. If I send a student down for evaluation, they go with a Linkit report. If you go to INRS, it goes with a Linkit report. It's really become part of who we are.
Okay. Ms. Ms. Walker?
Just one question. So if I look at the entire staff, what's the percentage of teachers that actually use Linkit?
It's about time. If what we have to do, and we just do this, we call a faculty meeting that is a Linkit faculty meeting. It's a data faculty meeting. And that is a big, when we were interviewing principals, that was actually a specific question. How will you organize time so that data is used deliberately? Because otherwise it's going to be the teacher who absolutely loves it and is just natural. I will say our math teachers use it more, and I don't blame them for it. I think we have other tests that we can use in language arts. You read with a kid, you know if they're struggling or not. But our math teachers specifically are using it, especially our math teachers who are focusing on incorporating a guided math workshop approach, because you need to know who needs what skill set.
I have one question.
Yes. Would you?
Does this information also feed into the report cards that go out to parents?
Not typically, just because of when we administer.
Okay.
So we administer in January, which is right after the November report card, so it doesn't often go in unless teachers can create their own assessments. So if a report card period is coming up and a teacher has on their report card computing with fractions, and they're like, you know what, I want to do one quick check of the class, they can make an assessment and then use it that way. As I said, Lincoln's really grown to be so many pieces and so many things. I will tell you it is something that the middle school is starting to use.
Okay.
So when we recommend students for high math, this is something, because River Edge and Oradell both administer Linkit.
Good.
Mr. Walsh.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Walsh.
Can you tell me, if I was a parent who had a child in school, would I know what they're struggling with? Is there a way? Obviously, if they take a Linkit test, they know what, depending if it's language arts, they know what they're struggling with in language arts if they don't do well. And the same thing happens in math. Is the parent aware of that
As
right
Mrs.
away? I mean,
Right away, probably no. I would say at the fall goal-setting conference, the fall Linkit is something that is shared. If the January one, there are parents that have Linkits become something they know, so there are many parents that will ask in January for a score report. We don't immediately send it out. It's something that comes in if we have a concern about a child, a parent's going to absolutely know, because it's one of the things we're going to share at an intervention and referral services meeting. But we don't do a blanket send in January of everyone's scores.
so the parents don't get homework then?
No.
I mean, it's better, we don't do that many face-to-face meetings with the teacher and the parent, right?
We're down to one a year. It's the goal setting. And then
Okay.
I will say that because our report card has changed to include this type of language, you're not getting a score in math anymore, right? You're getting a score in how are you doing in adding fractions, how are you doing in identifying 3D shapes. So because that detail of information is on the report card. When a parent gets the report card, they're going to have that detail of information. And this is where I believe our staff has grown tremendously in the past year. Gone are the days of keep reading as your only report card comment. Parents are being told within their report card comment, continue to count numbers in kindergarten from 1 to 20. Continue to practice sight words. So they are getting that data, not necessarily through Linkit, but through their report card.
Thank you.
Okay, any other? Robin?
One last question. I'm going to goal number 3 for the social emotional support. One of the things we had talked about originally when we talked about Open Circle and stuff was using the Open Circle model or the lingo within the community. And I guess we'll learn more about the panorama at the retreat, but is that something that we're still considering?
Yeah. We've put a lot of time, money, and effort into Open Circle. So we need to continue. I hate to say, COVID couldn't have happened at a worse time when you're taking on a huge district goal. We were about to do another parent academy on it. So we're going to have to do a complete refresher for everyone in our community in September and get back to that language and figure out which of the routines are going to stay the same and which of the routines are going to go separately. What Panorama will do is, through a self-assessment, students will be able to say, like, when I face a problem, I'm comfortable if I can't succeed, and they'll evaluate themselves on a Likert scale, right? Then a teacher will actually be able to have a readout of the strengths of their class. Panorama will tell them, hey, you know what, you might want to use this lesson on grit. So we use the Open Circle structure to actually take that topic into it. Open Circle is just as much about the structures as it is about the specific teaching lessons.
Having seen no other comments, let's move on to Business Administrator's Report. Mr. Mamar?
Okay, thank you. Just a quick reminder that for this November's annual school election, all interested candidates must file a nominating petition with the county clerk in order for their name to appear on the ballot. This year we have 3 seats that are going to be open, and for the board members whose terms are expiring, you'll find the packet with the nominating petition in there for you. Anyone in the community that's interested can also either email me, I can send it through email, or they could come into the business office between the hours of 9 and 4 o'clock.
Thank you. Minutes, review of minutes for June 23rd. They're included in your packet. Tonight we have approval of minutes for June 9th. Someone like to make a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes of June 9th.
Okay, John, Rita. J2.
Mrs. Negum,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Levy,
Abstain?
Mrs. Norian,
Yes.
Mrs. Shapiro,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Abstain.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mr. Darian.
Yes. Committee reports. First is the administrative items. Ms. Walker, would you like to take A1 through A3, and then we'll also add A4 for back-to-school night, changing the date from 9/9 to 9/23?
I'd like
The other
Opposite-
way.
The opposite way.
I'm sorry, I said it reversed. 9/23 to 9/9.
okay. I'd like to present A1 through A3 with the A4.
Okay?
I
Which is-
second it.
Thank you, John. Give me 1 second, let me just write down who. Just to clarify, A4 is a motion to change back-to-school night from September 23rd to September 9th. Okay, John?
Mrs. Negum,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes.
Mrs. Levy,
Yes.
Mrs. Norian,
Yes.
Mrs. Shapiro,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes.
Mr. Darian.
Yes. Buildings and grounds, I'll take that. Before I introduce these items on the agenda, I wanted to talk about our last building and grounds meeting. Notes are in your packet, but just for the public, we discussed the parking lot. We're going to repair our parking lot by repaving, but we're also extending a section of the parking lot 32 feet, which will allow us to have 6 more parking spaces. It'll also clean up the area for the dumpster and give us some additional storage on either side. And the status of that is they've already, graded the area. They've put in curbing. They've put down the substrate, gravel, and I guess next week they're going to be finishing? Mm-hmm. Okay. We discussed basement hallway. Right now, we're looking to find contractor to give us an HVAC solution. So until we get that, that project is kind of on hold. The Center Street parking lot retaining walls. This is on the interior courtyard. We have 2 retaining walls made of concrete. They're Spalding, and we're looking to fix the concrete. It's mostly cosmetic, but we still want to fix it. And waterproofing, this would be the area outside of the faculty lounge and the tag room, and we want to paint it with a waterproofing membrane. And then finally, we talked about surplus projects. We have some surplus cash from the 2021 fiscal year, and we've decided, and there's further details in the finance section tonight, but we've decided to move money into our capital reserve and our maintenance reserve and our the other emergency reserve.
Just maintenance and
Maintenance and
capital.
Okay, thanks. And for the purpose of remodeling this room. So that would be everything, whether it's the seats, the floor, the carpet, this painting, not the wood, but just the general painting, the foyer. It would be a complete remodel of this auditorium. So that's all we discussed. And with that, I'd like to introduce items B1 through, I think it's just B1.
I'll second it.
I have a question.
Yes.
With us allowing use of the building, again, for outside or community activities, are we going, it hasn't been discussed in policy or anything like that, are there going to be any specific requirements regarding masking or cleaning or anything like that as we move forward on the people who are using the building?
Oh, just in general, not specifically to the, I'm thinking auditorium for some reason.
No, I'm, like, for here, like the Girl Scouts and Brownies that
so-
are using it, are they under the same rules and regulations that the school is under, and do they know that?
Yes, like the YWCA program, when they're here, they have to follow this, whatever protocols we have in place. So I'm not saying we're going to have them wipe their own surface down. We would take that on as part of our custodial
Okay.
piece. But if we are masked inside, they will be masked inside. If we have no food within 3 feet, they can have no food within 3 feet. We wouldn't change protocols for anyone.
So
'Cause it would-
do the Girl Scouts and the Brownies do they all know that, I guess? Because that's not on the form currently.
That's a good point. We can look at the building usage form. I think because we're not sure where we'll be yet
Yeah.
in September, it was kind of jumping ahead, and we can always send out another
Okay.
to anybody who has rented space, just to confirm these are the protocols when you are in the building.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Griffin.
Yeah, Mr. Darian, I know last time we had approved that $400,000 be transferred in the capital reserve account. Could you talk a little bit about what the difference is between that 400 to 700 that we're transferring at this point?
Gotta wait. Gotta wait till it comes up.
I thought that's what we were just talking about, D8.
Well, that's under finance. Is that what you're talking about, John?
Yeah.
We were-
Yeah, that's
we-
under finance. We're still under building and grounds. Let's talk about it on the next section. Is that all
Okay.
right?
Yeah, sorry.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Marmar?
Mrs. Negum?
Yes?
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Levy?
Yes.
Mrs. Noyan?
Yes.
Mrs. Shapiro?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Darian?
Yes. Curriculum, Ms. Norrie?
No report at this time.
Okay. Finance and Technology, Ms. Shapiro?
Finance met on June 28th. You'll also have those notes in your packet. The two things I wanted to mention, D9, a hearty thank you to Stop and Shop for every year continuing to support us. So we appreciate their donation of nearly $1,300. And also, hang on one second, D8 is the line item about increasing the amount of the transfer to the capital reserve account. So I can address that, and maybe Mr. Marmora can help me out if I get. So it doesn't mean that we're transferring $700,000. It's just a maximum and of some unused funds that were very unusual because of the COVID year. And then this room has specifically been on the radar for many years as far as parents and children being tired of falling out of chairs and having chairs fall around them. And it's been a dream of the PTA, I know, for a number of years to work on this room, and we've struggled with, you cannot piecemeal it with an 80-plus-year-old building. We always have expenses that we have to set aside for. So I'd like to make a motion to, oh, no, sorry.
Yes, before.
I'm sorry.
There might be other questions.
Okay.
Anyone else have questions? Finance, Technology? Robin?
No, there's got to be a motion and a
Actually,
Yeah,
second.
motion first and
questions,
then
you need to have the
questions.
motion and
Oh,
the
I'm
second
sorry.
motion.
I
So
lost track
probably
of where we
should've-
were.
That's
yeah,
all right.
I
Okay,
should
I'm
have
sorry.
probably introduced first. I'd like to make a motion to introduce items D1 through D10 for
I
approval.
second it.
Okay. All right, John?
Mrs. Negum?
Oh, I have a question
Question.
before.
Okay.
Yes.
Just curious, Mr. Shapiro, is the Stop and Shop, is that from using your
Yes.
people? Oh,
It's
really?
so cool.
And
Oh,
it
okay.
is actually the last year of the program.
Oh, is it?
It is? Oh,
Oh, okay.
it was nice to know that we were still contributing.
Yeah.
Oh, well. Well, they were good to us for many years,
Yeah.
so
Okay, that was
thank
it.
them anyway.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a comment. Mr. Griffin?
Yeah, just a question. So the 700,000, I know you guys mentioned some of it would be used for this room. That will require a different resolution, right?
Yes.
You're just stating that at that point, but the board would need to decide that as a group, right?
Yes, in Buildings and Grounds, we asked if we could increase that amount to 700,000 because we thought that in order to two things. One is in order to properly fix this room, it would cost more than 400,000. Just the seats alone, we had estimates in the past of 360,000, and that was many years ago. So I'm sure it's much more expensive. And we didn't want to just fix the seats and then leave the carpet the way it is, and so on and so forth, without doing the flooring. So we thought, this is a good time. I mean, we have excess money because we didn't have lunch. We didn't have lunch aids. We saved quite a bit of money there. And so we thought that this would be a good opportunity to fix the auditorium. During our Buildings and Grounds meeting, we itemized what we thought that entails. And, that roughly our budget was around 700,000. So we asked to increase the amount to 700,000. That is an up to amount, as Ms. Shapiro had said. And all we're doing tonight is just moving funds into that account with the hopes that they'll be earmarked for the auditorium. I mean, ultimately, when we do get proposals and we discuss it amongst the boards, then we'll have to approve the funding at that point. We'll take it out of cap reserve and earmark it towards the auditorium. Yes, Ms. Walker?
I also think that there are donations also pending that are coming in that would certainly be sizable to contribute to the renovation of this auditorium.
We have some monies already from the PTA in an account. Is that correct, Mr. Marmor?
Yes, that's correct.
And they also have money put aside that we don't have as well.
Okay, yes. Yeah, we had discussed, possibly using an interior designer just to make sure that the work is done. I felt a little uncomfortable using, taxpayer dollars for something like that, but with the PTA funds, that can help contribute to some of those costs, because we don't want at the last minute, the backs of the chairs not matching with the carpet, not matching with the paint. It just kind of, you're spending all that money, you want it to look nice. And I don't think, we didn't identify the wood as an area that would have to be repainted. And so now it's a challenge, right? How do you restore a 1928 auditorium and make it look nice, meet the school colors, and also, have everything, match? It's not an easy task. So, Ms. Shapiro?
I just wanted to say, it's also one of those things where this is, how many times has this room been renovated since 1928? Once, twice? What we do has to be durable, classy, and stylish for another 40 or 50 years. It's an investment that the next generation of students will enjoy, and we will continue to have maintenance in the building. But I know this has been on our radar for a long time. And there's only so long you can kick the can down the road when with these kinds of things.
Right. It also aligns with the latest STEAM initiatives. It's STEM with arts, and a lot of schools are introducing programs, art programs, or the arts programs, in with the auditorium, right? So, we can do other things other than just have every other year a play. So, so there's a lot of things that we can integrate. Hopefully, if we can get some funding, STEAM funding, that might help too. Because even though we have some money, we don't have to use it. So, but like I said, at this point, all we're doing is moving money to capital reserve.
Can I also state, over the years, we're talking about monies that are available, and there are large amounts that are available, but I believe that we need to recognize the little guys too, because I think Book and Needle also made a donation for the auditorium fund. And I know that different organizations have also put money towards it in the past. So let's not forget the little guys who help us get those
Sure.
$100, $200.
And the night that we approve it, we'll have to get everyone here. Wouldn't that be nice? Really, because,
nice.
if the PTA, we're talking, quite a bit of money, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
Takes the village, right?
Right.
The whole village.
Okay. So, Mr. Marmara, are we at the point where we can vote on this?
Sure. Mrs. Neegum?
Yes?
Mr. Griffin?
Yes?
Mrs. Levy?
Yes.
Mrs. Norian?
Yes.
Mrs. Shapiro?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Darian?
Yes. Delegate report, Mr. Walsh?
I have nothing to report.
Okay. And personnel, Ms. Walker?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to present 1A, 1 through 5, but I would also like to, before I present it, make a change. A would be just to change it to teacher, and the effective date would be 11/1.
What are you looking at?
Rita, I think you need to clarify that it's F1 that you're presenting, but F1 refers to the committee report, and you're referring to a change in the committee report.
Correct.
Right. I don't think everybody followed
Oh,
Yes.
okay. So,
Your microphone.
Yes.
yeah.
I second F1.
Wait, it's not finished yet.
Okay.
So F1, in addition, would be to change 1A and to change 5A, and there would be only 1 and 2, not 3. Eliminate the 3.
You're talking about teacher retirement, 1A,
Yes.
and 5A,
5A, 1 and 2 will eliminate 3.
5A, okay, let's see. 5A, 1 and 2.
Yep, and 3 is eliminated.
1 and 2 would be changed.
No.
No.
they'll
No,
stay
1
the
and 2
same.
stay.
They stay the same.
So 3 would be changed,
Just not, it's eliminated for tonight.
eliminated. Okay.
Ms. Walker, the effective date, or we're not doing that change?
I second whatever
Did-
Rita
Did you
said.
mention that? Oh, she did?
I said that.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a date changed on 1A?
11.
11-1.
11-1, okay.
Any questions?
And that was moved and seconded by Mr. Walsh.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Marmar?
Mrs. Negum,
Yes.
Mr. Griffin,
Yes?
Mrs. Levy,
Yes.
Mrs. Norian,
Yes.
Mrs. Shapiro,
Yes.
Mrs. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Walsh,
Yes,
Mr. Darian.
Yes. Policy, Ms. Levy?
Nothing to report. I'll just say that if Ms. Bozios or the administration find the need for us to adjust the building's use policies, just to let us know, and we can meet to do that. Thank you.
Okay. Public relations, Mr. Griffin?
Yeah, I would just remind the chair and vice chair that there was a request that's pending to have the goals of the committee set. I think there was still an outstanding difference on what the goals would be, and in accordance with our bylaws, I'd like for the president and vice president to present that. No meeting since then.
Okay. Our COVID task force? Mr.
Right,
Griffin?
yeah, right now, the administration has plan for safe return to in-person instruction that has been drafted for this fall, and the committee will be reviewing it soon, but everything is moving along swimmingly.
Okay. Mr. Shapiro?
Is that something that we'll get to look at?
I think what Mr. Griffin is referring to is the document that's on the front page of the website. It
Oh.
doesn't, you, I think, saw it at the last board meeting, but it's very general because
Okay.
we really don't yet know specific guidance. And it's a little soon to make a plan and then have that plan changed, so.
Ms.
So,
Walker?
a question. So we have the website here, the COVID task force, which is board-oriented that you're speaking to, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And Ms. Bozios has, and the administrators have another task force, correct?
I think there's a building task force.
By state law, we have to have what's called a pandemic response team. So we do have a pandemic response team that is standing and has been since last year. So I think that's what you're asking.
Yes. So they both overlap then, in many cases, correct?
The board is more directional, high-level policy. I think that the task force that they set up is very specific to the plans within the school. The board committee is more high-level, and it was started last year because of the extra need. It may not be needed going forward, but right now I think it still serves a purpose.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. Open to the public. Any members of the public would like to speak on any items? Just state your name and your address for the record, please.
Yes, my name is, is this on?
I can barely hear you.
Is there a light on?
the light on. The
No,
light
there
is on now. Ooh,
Yeah, perfect.
wow, wow. My name is Don Lapone. By way of introduction, I've been a member of Oradell family for many, many years. I'm actually the bit player in my family. My wife was a graduate of OPS. My daughter, Laura, graduate of OPS. My two granddaughters now are going to be in the 4th and 5th grade here at OPS. And I can say that the Oradell education process has been a big success for our family. I'm a little nervous, I think. I didn't realize I was going to be so nervous. To get to the point, I've been reading a lot, like you all have, and the area of our interest has to do with masking of the children when they start school in September. We've done a huge amount of reading where we have been seeing studies that have been done with carbon dioxide and oxygen levels. There's social issues, psychological issues. I mean, it's vast, and unfortunately, so much of it is politicized. Sometimes you don't know what to believe, and you don't know what you're hearing and who you're hearing it from. But if you saw these two little girls, and you have children, grandchildren of your own, I'm sure, and these two little girls are probably the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life. And we want them to be healthy and beautiful and stay that way. They are flourishing in this environment at OPS. They are learning so much, and they astound us every day. The children that they bring home to my daughter's home and to our home astound us every day with the learning and what's been happening here. And I don't think that Laura and my daughter Laura and I expected to see this wonderful presentation by our superintendent this evening. It's interesting to see something as quantitative and objective as being used to measure performance. And I think that, having a business background, those are the kinds of things that interest us greatly. To get to the point, and to not take any more of your time, we would like to know, I have a little printout, and the headline is, "Will Murphy reinstate school masks after CDC urges unvaccinated students to wear them?" And I think it's still up in the air. And so my question is, what is the board's position on masking if things stay the way they are in the state of New Jersey?
This is mostly a comment section. Normally, we would not, engage in direct questions and answering.
I understand.
Ms. Bozios, would you like to take that?
Sure. Truthfully, I absolutely hear you, and you represent a portion of our population. We're not ready to make a decision yet. We're going to wait and see where the numbers are. We have had an increase in cases across the state, and so that's why when Mrs. Walker asked before about the meeting, we haven't even started to meet yet. We want to give it a couple more weeks and then sit down with our school pandemic response team that has representatives from parent population, the staff, and the school, and then we'll make our decision. I know some of our neighboring districts are already starting to make decisions, but we felt it was best to give it at least 2 more weeks and then decide where we're going. As you may have heard, right now inside the building we are masked, outside the building we are not. That's already a change from where we ended the school year, but we felt comfortable making that change, and as soon as we see some more data, then we'll be better prepared to make that decision going forward.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that, and I understand that these things take our process. I've had conversation, just as a little bit of feedback, I've had conversations with many parents about this situation, and there is a very high level of concern that going forward with masking would be considered a significant detriment to the children. That's just what the feedback is.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. And by the way, thank you all for your service time. I read some of the documents on your website, And one of the things says that you don't get paid for this, and you're sure spending a great deal of your time and expertise, and it really is appreciated. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Anyone else? Anyone on Zoom? I see.
Greg, are we still, because we don't see it.
Yeah, sorry.
Are we on?
I was just going to say we have 2 attendees, but no one has raised their hands.
Okay.
So,
To attend, like you and him, or like other people?
no, we're panelists.
Okay.
Yeah, so, so far, I don't see anyone in the audience, and no one on Zoom has expressed interest, so I'd like to close public comment. Do we have to vote on that? I don't remember.
No.
No, okay. All right. Next item, old business. Mr. Walsh?
I want to thank all the board members for showing up for the parade. This is the first time in years. I never started counting them, so I couldn't tell you how many years. But we've never had the 9 board members march in the parade in a long time.
And in our matching shirts.
And in our matching shirts.
And in our new vehicle.
And in our new vehicle. Yes.
There was a lot of,
And I want to thank the president, who's not here tonight, for seeing the bulletin about the parade. I never got it. I mean, I don't know why it's not delivered to us every year when the parade's going to be, who's going to be marching. It should be delivered to us. I don't know if anybody got it in their house. It's probably political, but we had a truck. We had a good time. I mean, it was a pretty nice parade. There were less people marching this year. Not less people in the audience, but less people marching. But I want to thank the 9 board members for showing up and marching. And I want to thank the president for noticing it and going after the town, telling them that the Board of Education marches behind the mayor and council every year. Now, we had a former board member, who's not with us anymore, but she would be screaming to the rafters the same thing, that we march behind the mayor and council every year. So if anybody hears this, whatever this is, the Zoom or whatever, they can jot it down now, that Board of Education is behind the mayor and council. But it was really nice. As I said, it's been a long time since we had all 9 board members march in shirts, behind a truck or in front of a truck.
In front of the truck. And we need to thank Greg for driving the truck for us.
Yes.
yeah, that was fun.
Yeah,
Setting it up the night before,
Yes,
right,
so that
right.
everybody would be comfortable if we decided to hop in the back.
that's right.
Yes, next year, if we do it the same way, and Greg does the same job, we should have the children come out and sit. He had room for, I don't even know, 12, let's say 12.
How can we make that into some sort of contest, Ms. Bozios? Forget pies in the face. How many boxes of cereal to ride in the back of the truck?
I
And
think
we
the
did
business
miss the
administrator would want to
superintendent.
see his driving first. The superintendent will work on scheduling her vacations around the parade moving forward.
Yes. I also think that part of the reason why there was not information that was distributed to the public was because originally there had not been plans for a 4th of July parade because the plans had to be made earlier, much earlier in the year. And at that point in time, the COVID numbers were not so that they thought that they would be able to have a
Okay.
parade. So in deference, thank you to the mayor and council for being able to put it together so quickly and to have us march. I think we did the town proud.
I think it was a lot of fun. It worked out well. We had a lot. It
Yeah.
was the best weather in many years, and we had a lot of candy. There were a lot of kids. It's interesting to see the demographics geographically change throughout the community. So many years ago, as an example, when we would go down Maple and make a right on Ridgewood, there were all these little kids lined up on all the curbs, and it was the busiest corner. And this year, there weren't any. They were just older kids standing back, being cool, watching us go
Those
by.
were the same young kids that had been on the curb.
Yes. So,
That's right.
and then Oradell Avenue, before the railroad tracks, from 3rd Street to the railroad tracks, used to be ghost town. I mean, there'd be little pockets here and there. But I was concerned, though. We were giving away about a third of our candy even before we got to the railroad tracks on Oradell Avenue. It was just really interesting. And
Well, we had one representative family that's always been in that area, but this year they moved from one side of the street to the other side of the street because somebody had turned their sprinklers on, so they had to stand on the other side. But they were there.
Make sure that's in the minutes. Please,
Yeah.
please.
Don't worry about it.
yes.
Just having fun.
So, okay. Any other old business? Okay. New business? No new business? Okay. Someone like to make a motion to close our session?
So moved,
I'll second it.
because we don't
Okay.
need the closed session, right?
No closed session tonight? Okay. Like to
All right.
adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.